Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Let's talk about gardening. I want to give you the full scoop on what credit gardening means, or to go into the garden, which is a term that you often hear in the credit space, and really how to do it right, because I notice a lot of people do this wrong. And so let's talk about it. Now, let's dive in. So credit gardening is essentially when you stop app spraying, or when you take a certain amount of time away from actively trying to seek more credit or credit seeking behavior. And we're gonna take time and cultivate relationships and essentially stop. Now, what's interesting that I've noticed over the years now is that most of the time people stop because they have to, not because they want to, but because they're starting to get low limits, or they're starting to get straight up denials, or something is actually going wrong in this infinite loop of credit seeking behavior. And so I wanna talk about that piece of it, and then really just some of the kind of more dangerous side of it, which is like the mental addiction that starts to happen, you know, the brainwave pattern issues and things like that happen from the credit addiction. But out of the gates, the number one way that you can tell that it's time to stop or it's time to slow down is when your limits start going down. When your starting limits start going down. So most people would think, oh, it's very obvious when I start getting denials. Not necessarily. Actually, I don't know, I'd argue it's worse to get a card with a starting limit of $500 or $1,000 than to get a straight up denial. For somebody that's rebuilding, a $500 to $1,000 limit sounds appealing, right? It sounds like, oh, well, I can build up that relationship. I agree. Talking for most people, especially those that are, seasoned veterans in the space, I mean, they're not too happy with a card unless it's a $10,000 or above starting limit. Most people, that's kind of how you transition, right? That's what it ends up going to down a long enough path, right? And then from there, some people start to set up even more rules beyond that. Some people just like 20,000 and above, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the tall tale signs that it's time to stop with an app spray is getting those lower starting limits. Like I said, 500 to 1,000 on the personal side, and I would say 1,000 to 2,000 on the business side, because those limits are almost unusable for somebody with a good credit profile, that's above 720s, that has, a good amount of personal credit already. On a business side, it's like $1,000 to $2,000. It's almost unusable. And on the personal side, yeah, at that point, I've got plenty of $20,000 cards. A $500 or $1,000 limit, again, is borderline unusable, especially if we're paying attention to our utilization and usage, right? So anyway, that's usually when people stop. But what I noticed is that there's a lot of people who have a hard time stopping with getting credit. And it sounds like a silly thing, right? But it turns into a habit, and then it turns into an identity, and then it's an addiction at some point. And the reason is really, really simple. We operate as humans, let's go deep for a second if you guys don't mind. We operate off of brainwave patterns. You can look this up. We have brainwave frequencies, 5. Gamma is the one that I started researching years ago because I was obsessed with how to get into flow state and stay there for as long as possible, because the state itself is just miraculous. And if you've ever been in flow state, you know what I'm talking about. If you ever did extreme sports or high pressure sports, then you've probably been in flow, chances are, whether you knew it or not. And so the one that we're gonna focus on here though is beta brainwave frequency, okay? Beta is actually like this hyperactive state that's it's where fight or flight is associated with. It ties into your amygdala as well as like anxiety, and all of this comes from being in a beta brainwave pattern. Now, it's fine because throughout the day, we're usually cycling through different brainwave patterns, right? We're up, we're down, we're tired, we're awake, so as the day rolls on and as nighttime comes, we start to slow down, get into more of an alpha frequency, theta, delta, and then we go into sleep, right? But for some people, they actually get stuck in this brainwave pattern. And I don't know why more people don't actually dive into this and look at this, but I see evidence of this all over the place. So people who are constantly taking in too much caffeine after 3-4 p.m., maybe they don't sleep very well, or they're taking too many stimulants. Like, you can get into this place where you're taking too many nootropics, or maybe you're into something a little bit harder like Adderall or modafinil or something like that. You can get into these states to where you're never really coming out of that brainwave pattern. And that becomes an issue because the longer that we're into something, we start to associate with it more, right? It starts off as a hobby, maybe this thing where we just pick up a couple things, and then before you know it, we're like a full-blown into it. We're watching videos about it. We're following other people. We're in these communities. All we're doing all day long is talking about this one thing. In this case, it's credit, but it can happen with anything. I see guys who associate their identity with their Lego collections and their video game collections. I mean, you name it, you can do it. I mean, look at Seth Rogen. He identifies himself with his marijuana addiction. So, it doesn't really matter what the thing is. We can get addicted to it and start to identify with it. And in credit, I just think that's a really dangerous game. So we start to collect, and you start to actually hear these words being used. Collecting cards, I like the colors of the cards, and that is, I think we've gone too far already at that point, because there's really no point in doing that. These cards serve a purpose. Getting credit funding serves a purpose to help you grow and establish yourself in business and hopefully level yourself up. Remember, in America, in Canada, in G20 countries, these credit products exist. In most other countries, they do not. So people do not have that advantage, which I would say it's a massive advantage. Some people don't like the credit system. People complain about it all day long. I understand that. This gives you an edge, it gives you an advantage, because we can use the bank's money. And first off, all of it that you've got is free in the first 30 days because there's no interest. After that, obviously, if you carry a balance, there's interest. But the credit game itself is this amazing vehicle that you can use and tool that you can use to propel yourself forward, to become something else, right? Whether you want to be rich or you just want to better provide for your family, you want to finally establish that business that you're, gung-ho and super excited and passionate about. This is a tool to allow you to do that. We just got to be careful with it, right? And so again, like getting stuck in that brainwave pattern and just riding these dopamine hits of approvals and denials and ups and downs and all this, we can get into the same issues with trading, whether it's cryptocurrencies or legacy markets. These are addictive traits and behaviors that start popping up on a long enough timeline, right? And then, like I said, eventually, I think the worst thing is that you start to identify, and your value as a human starts to become associated with how many credit cards or how many limits you've got or whatever, right? Because let's not forget that at any given day, the bank can, wake up and close your accounts. They can cut your limits. Look at Synchrony. They can do whatever they want. So yeah, it's best to not associate so deeply with these credit products, right? Again, they are a vehicle, they are a tool simply designed to propel you forward. So I know we kind of went deep there for a second, but gardening can be a very productive process. So let me now wrap up with one more piece here. What should you actually be doing during the gardening process? You should be building relationships with more institutions during that time, building up transactional history with the existing banks, working towards credit limit increases, setting up and establishing new checking accounts on the personal side and on the business side. Going and establishing that LLC, getting it all set up, spending the thousands of dollars to set up properly, et cetera, et cetera. These are all the things that you want to do when you're going to be gardening for the next, usually 6 to 12 months, sometimes even 24 months. What better way to kill two birds with one stone, as they say, than to tackle all of these areas? And then when it comes time, again, inquiries have cleared off and everything's ready in position, we can tackle a much larger front. So the next time we go back to the pool to get more credit funding should be larger. Every single app spree should be larger than the last if you're spreading this out and pacing this properly. Because again, remember, we're playing a long-term game here. So anyways, that's all I've got for you in this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about everything that we just covered here. And then if you've got any additional ideas or fun spins that you put on gardening, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. While you're here on the channel, if you're brand new here, watch more videos. I don't just say that because it helps us with the algorithms on YouTube. I also say it because it's going to help you. You're going to see the common denominators, the common thread that runs through the foundation of what we talk about on this channel, and I think it'll positively affect your credit journey. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next one. Hey, you should subscribe. 60% of you are not subscribed yet. Right there. Okay, bye.